morning. It's Sunday in December, the third day of December, and it is raining out here. I'm in New Jersey. It's still a beautiful day. It's not too cold. It's about like 60 degrees. But anyway, I have a few moments and I wanted to talk about my journey with hysterectomy. Um, I noticed there wasn't too many videos about, the reason why people decide to have a hysterectomy and what happens afterwards, what happens during. So I wanted to make a video about it so you don't feel, alone if you do have this surgery. Um, so I decided to have a hysterectomy for many reasons. Um, One of which is more of a preventative measure. So in 2022, I had just gotten back from a vacation and I got my period. And that period was very light, which is not a normal for me. And it lasted for about 2 weeks, which is also a not normal for me. And not to be gross, but my periods since I started having a period had always been heavy. But when I hit my 40s, all of a sudden my periods were extremely heavy, lots of clotting, and um, I felt kind of like a pressure every time I had a bowel movement. I'm sorry, it's gross, but it's the workings of the female body. Um, and I thought it was just because I was getting older. So when I had my period for 2 weeks and it was extremely light, that was a really big red flag for me. Um, I thought maybe I was going into early menopause, which at that time I didn't think was the case because I was only 43. And what I really thought it was, oh, there's my dog. What I thought it was always what I jump to every time there's something wrong with me, which is cancer. Um, I'm sure a lot of you have that kind of anxiety, and for me, it's even more because my mom had passed away from endometrial cancer. So, yeah, so I decided to go to the doctor and see what was going on. I went in. She said, no, it's not normal for me to have a period that light for 2 weeks, and that I should have an ultrasound and some blood work. And so that's what I did. So about a week later, she called me into the office, which is also very scary. Like, when you have the doctor call and say like, hey, I need to talk to you, that's like, oh my gosh, I was so nervous. Anyway, so I went in and she said my lining of my uterus, which is what you normally shed when you have your period, is extremely thick. And it's not normal for it to be thick considering that I've had a period for 2 weeks, even though it was a light period. And so she wanted to do a biopsy. And I had asked her what it could possibly be, and she said, she doesn't know what it can be. I mean, worst case scenario, it is what you think it is, which is cancer. But she didn't want to talk about that until we figured out what was happening. I said okay, and so I proceeded to schedule the appointment. And with this specific doctor and this group, there's a lot of people, they have a lot of patients, a lot of doctors, and she said that I couldn't schedule the biopsy because their scheduler was on vacation for a few weeks and I would have to wait until she got back, which is crazy to me because if it is something if it was cancer, that's, time is of essence. And so, luckily, my husband works for a great hospital called Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York City, and he's a surgical nurse, and this is what they do. And so he was able to get me an appointment with their doctors at MSK. And I got an appointment, I think, within less than a week, which is crazy. And so I went in and I had to go under anesthesia to get the biopsy done. And I got my results from that. And they had said that the portion that they had scraped was benign, which is such a blessing. But they also wanted to do an MRI to see why the lining is so thick. Because they also did an ultrasound, another set of blood work, and they just wanted to figure out what it was. Anyway, so I got my MRI done. That was also scheduled pretty quickly, and um, it was adenomyosis. And what adenomyosis is just an abnormal benign growth in your uterus or in the endometrial area, which can cause abnormal periods, very heavy periods, a lot of pain. And it's a diagnosis that you can live with. Thank God it wasn't cancer. I was very scared of that. Again, my mom had endometrial cancer, and she passed from it. From diagnosis to her passing was only like 4 months. And so I was extremely scared that that was um, going to happen to me, but it wasn't, thank God. And plus, my aunt also had cervical cancer, which led to brain cancer, which led to her demise. And so this was very like a roller coaster of emotions because I was scared, but I also really wanted to find out what was happening. So it is adenomyosis, or it was adenomyosis. And if you really look up the cure for adenomyosis is essentially a hysterectomy. But you can live with it. There's lots of women who get diagnosed at a younger age, and who opt not to have a hysterectomy because of their childbearing age. But and that's what I was going to do because I have a son and I wanted another. And even though I was approaching my mid 40s, there's still hope for me to have a second baby. So that's why I was like, okay, let me just live with this diagnosis and see what happens. So after we found out everything, that was November of 2022. I had gotten a phone call from my gynecologist, and they were like, "Oh, we're ready to schedule your biopsy appointment." And I was like, "I'm already done." I'm never going back to that place ever again. Anyway, so after my diagnosis, I had gotten my period again, and it was heavy, painful, but still normal. And it was like that for the next, like, I think 2 to 3 months. There was about a month or two that I had skipped my period, which is interesting. And then in the summer, or early spring rather, I got my period for 2.5 months, and it was brutal. Most of the time it was excessive, and I was bleeding a lot. I was bleeding through pads, and I had the largest tampon available to market, and I was bleeding through that, all in the midst of trying to train for a marathon. So it wasn't fun, and running with that kind of bleeding was very difficult. Um, and so that finally ended, and then I got my period again, and it was like 2 weeks later. It was extremely heavy. And so I called the doctor, and the doctor was like, really, the only thing that you can do to treat that kind of symptom is to have a hysterectomy. And I didn't really, who wants to have a major surgery? I definitely didn't, but I didn't want to live like that anymore. And also, I had a lot of fear of it turning into something worse later down the line. So that kind of is what that definitely made me decide, like, hey, I think we should just have a hysterectomy as sort of a preventative measure. Um, because my mom was postmenopausal. She was 58 and she had endometrial cancer, and she started bleeding. Obviously, that's abnormal for someone who's postmenopausal. And she was bleeding for about 2 to 3 weeks. And when she finally decided to go to the doctor and they figured out what it was too late. And I remember her doctor saying that she should have went earlier to get the diagnosis, because endometrial cancer, if caught early, has a higher survival rate. And so, me thinking about that and me going through the journey of losing someone you love so much and seeing them deteriorate is not something that I wanted for my family or my son. And so, in my head, I'm like, okay, even though this is something you can live with, it's still an abnormal growth. And I didn't want it to lead to the path of, um, you know, benign turning into malignant. And so we decided as a family, my husband, again, is a nurse, and he helps me make these decisions, that we wanted to get a hysterectomy and just kind of call it a day. And that's why I decided to get it done. And I'm going to post some videos of my um, operation day and post operation. Right now, I am on week 3 of recovery, and it's been very interesting. Um, and it's been an emotional roller coaster. It's sad for me too, because I really wanted a second baby, even though God blessed me with my first, and he's such an amazing boy. That's really why I wanted to have another. Um, Deciding to have a hysterectomy and, you know, hopefully being able to kind of eliminate any chance of me getting cancer in that region. That's was really the reason why I decided to have a hysterectomy. I could have lived with the pain, or could have lived with the that excessive amount of bleeding, but it was basically, to it's longevity. I want to be here for a very long time for my son and my family. So that's the reason why I decided to have a hysterectomy. Um, and so I hope this helps you with your decision making or your journey, or you're not alone. And I'll post 2 more videos. Um, one video about the day of the surgery and what happened, and I did have a complication, a minor one, but it was still a complication nonetheless. And then my recovery journey. All right, thank you. Thanks for watching. Talk to you soon.